Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another Supercoach Insider podcast. My name is Swizz. Continuing on with our team and Supercoach discussions, we've got the original OG Supercoach Insider, Chris. How are you, mate?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. Good to get back behind the mic again. I think we just recorded a great little boom or bust podcast. So stick around on the channel and hit that one up. There's me, Ben, and Swizz going at each other for an hour and a half. Not bad at all. So yeah, good to get behind the mic. I just come from state champs, as you can probably see with the hat for basketball for our my stepson, and that was 5 days of mayhem. So now that's out of the way. I've got a couple of weeks left until probably. I think we usually like sort of start of February, or I guess around Australia Day is kind of when Supercoach takes off for the normal public. But obviously we've had access to Team Picker for a while, so it's pretty exciting. How many times have you changed your team, mate?
Mate, I've been quite responsible because obviously I've been hosting a lot of these team discussions. And in the past, I must admit, I literally finish it off and go and change my team. And I'm like, this season, no, I refuse to do that. So I've been trying to focusing on like BBL and NBL and other stuff that I'm involved in because otherwise I'll end up spending like an hour deleting my team and like, oh yeah, we talked about that player. Let's get him in.
Yeah, look, and that happens. I think I've been pretty good this. I haven't had time. This is the first year really where I really haven't had time to do any kind of super coach, like deep diving into my own team. But I do have another podcast that I'll bring out very shortly with my updated team, which I did on the weekend. So that'd be pretty cool. So that's where we start, mate. I've heard a couple of these, but you're
Before
leading the
we
shop.
start,
So.
as always, check us out on all our social media platforms, in particular the YouTube, Spotify. Get in contact with us via X Supercoach Insider 100, CFX_1 or Swizz 26. Okay,
Nice.
we will kick off with the first 5 games and also the Collingwood double game. So their fixture. Unfortunately, Collingwood are one of the 8 teams that do have that early bye because they are playing in the bloody opening round. They do have the Giants. So the good and the bad is we do get to have a look at how Collingwood structure up and also sort of any price changes, in particular if they got rookies or mid prices. The annoying thing is round 3, out they go. So if you're kind of looking at Collingwood players, there's probably a limit on what you can start, but maybe set yourself up that you might want to trade them in after they've had that early buy. They do have the round 14 buy later in the season as well, which is at least it's a mid buy. There's 5 buy rounds this year. So the good thing is you can potentially bring in a Collingwood player after they've had their 14 buy on the run home, and they can still cover you for a couple of those buy rounds. So that is a good thing. The Blues is that first double game. You got the Lions, Freo, the Crows, Hawks, and Melbourne. Probably not the greatest double games. Kind of would have sort of in the mark. You probably would have hoped for maybe one of the other easier teams, but if they're good enough, they'll get back up there. Early thoughts about that sort of fixture, mate, and the double games and the buy situation?
Look, I don't mind too much based on where we are and where we did in the off season. Like, Carlton have struggled to beat us of late, so whatever. Brisbane, I think, did we beat them twice last year? I think we did. Freo have been challenging. I think they're only going to get better, so they're tough. Adelaide is always a close game. I'm not sure how we went against them last year, but I feel like maybe we won one and dropped one. Hawthorn kill us. That's like they know how to play us very, very well, and they do a good job of it. So there's probably 2 losses there. And then Melbourne, they're our bunny to side. Like they cannot get over the hump, and I see nothing in them so far to be able to tell them otherwise. So look, probably where they're at, right? So they're a 50, they're 9th last year. Having a 50-50 style fixture, that's fine. Yeah, completely okay with that. And I think with their improvement in the off season, they can go into every game confident and thinking that there's a chance that they're going to win. I don't think there's any team that they can't beat. There's not like a complete outlier saying, "Hey, you cannot beat this team because you're not that good." I don't think there is that with Collingwood. I think on any given day they can win that game, regardless of location as well, whether it be Perth or Brisbane or whatever. They travel very well. So yeah, not too upset about that. What I will say is the first 5 games typically. And I think even up to we played Brisbane in round 6, I think. Round 6.
Yeah.
So that's a tough, and it was tough last year. We came out of the gate 0-3, so we really got to buckle up there. it really makes things a little bit difficult. I think fixture-wise, I will just sort of link it to a Supercoach target as well. So I really think that in round 1, Toby Bedford probably goes to Nick Dacos. And that could really impact his price by the buy. So if he has a tag game and then drops money in that, by round 3, round 4, you could look at bringing him in if he's bottomed out or whatever it may be. So there is an opportunity to take advantage of that. There's also
that's also sorry, Chris. That's if he's, and I expect because we're still sort of the 9th of March, maybe less than 2 months up. But if he's even up for the round 0 game, he obviously is struggling with a little bit of injury at the moment.
Interrupted preseason, potential tag games, early buy. Like, there's enough reasons to say you just don't start with Dacos that I think that most people shouldn't. And there will be a lot of people that do, and that's fine. And like, he's obviously Dacos could still go out there and be the number 1 player this year again because he's that good. Like, I think we all agree. Also, Willem Drew has done some jobs, in the past. Does he go out there and tag a Nick Dacos? Don't think he really gets that from the Bulldogs. Carlton, does he get Hewitt? Sydney, does he get? They've been tagging. Who were they used last year?
James Jordan.
Jordan.
Yeah, is there.
Right. Now,
tagger,
usually I say throw out this tag situation for early in the season, except I think there's a caveat to that, and that's when there is a guy so far and away above the best.
Yeah, we get what you mean. That's
team,
fair,
right?
That's 100% fair, mate.
He's 20% better than the next best player on Collingwood's list, like, if we're honest. And is he the best player in the competition? You could probably throw Bont in that mix, and they would be 1A, 1B, regardless of how you want to throw it up, right? So I think that there's a reason for concern. I think that you probably don't want to start him. You evaluate the season and how it's going, and then you can make that decision. So that's probably my first takeaway from those first 5 games.
Yeah, I think it's the standard. I want him for Anzac Day. It's usually about the case. And I think that was the same thing last year. I was like, if I'm not starting him, how do I have him in for Anzac Day? Because I think that's the repair. I know we it's obviously a Collingwood pod, but we talk about
chance
this now.
He wants
booms and busts. There's 2 players you want on Anzac Day. It's Darcy Parish and Nick Dacos.
Yeah, I really hope that they shake each other's hands and just go, see you later.
I feel like it happens every year. They shake each other's hands. They rack up 40 touches, and it's like, which one's getting the medal?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. So, look, definitely something to be considering of, and I really want to make it to Anzac Day. On a personal note, this year, I really, really want to come down. I've missed the last 2 years, and it hasn't been the same. So, let's go to Anzac Day together, buddy.
Yeah, let's do that for sure. All right, I'll come into my best 23, and then Chris can tear shreds of it. So I've got Maynard, Frampton, IQ, Howe, Darcy Moore, Houston. Houston with an asterisk because he is missing the early, I think it's the round 0 game. So we won't obviously see how he goes in there because that's suspension, but we'll come in after that, after recruiting him from Port Adelaide. Sidey, Perryman coming in from the Giants, Josh Dacos, Bo McQuarrie, Daniel McStay, Hill, and then Schiltz. Membry coming in from St Kilda. Could have swapped that around with my check, but I've gone with Membry. Elliott, Darcy Cameron, DeGoey, and Dacos in the guts. Crisp, Pendles at age 73, still going great. Lipinski and Myercheck. And then I've gone Will Hoskin Elliott as the sub. Feel free, mate. Tell me your thoughts.
No, look, I think that's pretty damn good. To be honest, I think there's not much difference to how I would structure up. I mean, splitting hairs, but I will say this. I really do think strongly that McRae will go with a 3 big lineup. One thing that we've noticed in the last 2 years is that whenever we've had 3 healthy talls, he's wanted to try and get them all in. But the fact of the matter is, every time we've tried it, we've had an injury and we haven't been able to get out there. And there's been a couple of times when I've watched him on or listened to him on SEN when McRae was doing SEN and things like that. And he would just say, like, I'd love to have him out there, but the fact of the matter is we don't have the cattle, right? Now they've gone out and specifically grabbed Tim Membry, who's obviously cheap as chips. But he now comes in as our leading goal kicker for the year. Like, he's kicked more goals than any one of our forwards. So I think he starts because he's probably got 1 or 2 years, in him remaining. I think that they run with him, Myercheck, and McStay. And I think McStay is obviously then the relief ruck, right? So Cox is the one that's now not in that lineup. And that's fine. Look, like you'd be surprised. How old do you think Mason Cox is?
I actually know this. I think he's 32.
Yeah. So obviously because he's a US import, whatever, he started his career late. Like it doesn't seem like he's really been in the competition that long, but he
It's
really
actually
is on the
30.
back end of
He's
his
actually
career.
33, and by the first game he's 34. So I've actually
Right.
underestimated that too.
Now you don't get shorter, obviously, but yeah, so he will be the relief ruck if Cameron gets injured or whatever it may be. If one of the bigs get injured, he'll come in and play some minutes. But realistically, we're looking at, I believe, Membry, Myercheck. Hopefully, he's back from injury as well, and of course, McStay. We missed McStay for a whole year with his ACL. Myercheck last year, I think, went down fairly early, wasn't it? Maybe halfway through the season or whatever it may be.
Yeah, he
And he just never came back.
didn't play all the games for sure. I was just going through something else. So McStay ended up playing 5 games. Myercheck played 11.
Yeah. And then, so I suppose outside of that, we do have what we were able to do last year is to develop a lot of depth. So I'll just go through it and I'll run off the guys that I do think won't play, unfortunately. And obviously that they provide a little bit of depth. So that's Harrison, who played really, really well last year in the minutes that he had. At this point with our squad, he's probably just depth. Dimatia didn't get a chance last year, but if we do get some inside injuries, there's a chance that he comes in. But there is a chance that they say play Harrison as that relief and they rotate the squad to put Pendlebury inside or whatever it may be. But I'm really hoping that we see Dimatia this year. Charlie Dean, I don't think gets the starting nod. There's a couple of things about this, right? So Frampton, like you have there, I also have as the starting fullback. But there is every chance that he's not necessarily locked into that 22. So Charlie Dean, if he can unseat him, and of course Reef McInnes, who played the large parts as a third tall forward last year, he's actually been training as a defender. So there's a chance that they can go with that kind of combination. I kind of feel like that's like more break in case of emergency, not like this is the way that we want to go. And then we've got Ed Allen, who obviously was really impressive in the last game of the season last year. He had played one game. He's a rookie price, and I'll probably go a little bit further into that later. Finn McRae, Bytel, Sullivan, Markov, Will Parker.
The former Brownlow medalist.
Indeed.
No, that's like Tom Mitchell. Like I think people forget that he's actually he's still on that list.
So Tom Mitchell he had foot issues all year, and then he was recovering, and then I think he was a bone stress fracture or bone stress injury. So essentially, he's back in the moon boot at the moment, and he's working towards. There's a potential that he plays round 1, but I personally, without a preseason at his age, I really think that's a bad idea. I think that he's probably better off developing and having a mini preseason, and then jumping in. Let's call it round 4, round 5. I think the VFL starts a couple of weeks after the AFL. Hey.
Yes.
So I reckon 2-3 games in the VFL, and then coming in, say around maybe just before Anzac Day or something like that. But right now I don't have him on a as a sub or anything like that. I really don't think he plays round 1. Ned Long obviously played a little bit last year. I don't think he's just depth at this point. And then Ash Johnson, who's just hasn't shown these up to the level at AFL standard. So those guys are all guys that can play, but they probably won't unless there's injuries or whatever it may be. The one thing that I will other thing that I would probably reverse is McRae loves Will Hoskin-Elliott. Now, for good reason, and I don't think that he's going to be the sub because he's kind of a Mr. Fix-It. If we have an injury in game, he'll go back, he'll go forward, he'll go to the wing, like whatever the role is required. And he does all of those to a reasonable level. He's never like super outstanding, he's an amazing player, but he's always just that coach's dream. Nothing is going wrong if you've got Mr. Will Hoskin-Elliott in that role. It's just streamlined. It's always at a good level, not necessarily an amazing level. And so for that reason, I've always included him. I used to be a guy that was like, nah, Will Hoskin-Elliott, like he doesn't really do much, blah, blah, blah. But it's just the consistency that's really important for that. And McRae loves that from him. And so I think that he's probably in the team. And as shit as it is to say, I think that Lipinski is the one that misses out, even though he's the best runner at the club. So one thing that's great about Lipinski
I just couldn't see him be the one missing because he is such a good runner, and I really like Lipinski as a player.
I do too.
But then it's always sort of hard then who who sort of gets left out from there. And, but you wouldn't want, well, a lot of the time what ends up happening here is that, we've got that as the best 23, but how often do you actually ever get your best 23 on the park?
True. He's first
So
in for any injury, for sure.
Exactly. So one of those players is going to get injured, Hoskin Elliott, and it's probably that player that, of all those sort of 10 players you mentioned earlier, they become the sub.
And like, don't get me wrong, like you could play Lipinski off the half forward line, but realistically, we have some of the best pressure small forwards in the competition, and you need to try and capitalize on that. So, like McCreary, for example, I know that he's not the player. He's not a flashy player by any stretch. He's not the guy that's going to kick you 5 goals on any given day. But what he does around the ground in terms of his pressure on the ball, his tackling ability, his absolute sheer speed, like no one's catching. He won the grand final sprint, didn't he? I'm pretty sure he did.
Yeah, he might have. Yeah.
Like you can't replace that kind of speed. Like you can cover ground, like Sidebottom covers ground, but he doesn't have speed, right? Lipinski covers ground, but he's not really a high-end speed. McCreary is quick.
Yeah, McCreary
gets the ball.
Yep.
You're not catching him, right? He creates a lot from that. Now, I'd love for him to be able to kick better when he's on the run. That's one thing. But there's no other player like him on our list, so you kind of need to have him. Hill is a match winner. Schultz is that pressure guy on the forward line. You're not getting rid of Jamie Elliott. I know he's a little bit older. He can be a tall and a small at any given time. So they've got a really good mix forward of the ball. And you just don't want to upset that unless you need to through injury or whatever it may be.
Yeah, so it's probably that if for whatever reason everyone's going there, that's why I had our Hoskin Elliott. But also I feel like they probably want some speed on that bench, because I feel like at 3/4 time there's three scenarios for Collingwood come 3/4 time if there's no injuries happening. One is they give Darcy Cameron a good break in that 3rd quarter, and one of the 3 tools get subbed out to get a little bit more speed on the ball. Or if it's a situation where they probably might have this game in the bag, Pendles or Sidey, you're taking the vest.
I think, look, I said this last year. I can see opportunity for Lipinski being in the team if Sidebottom just retires. And I think there was a moment last year when I was like, no, you're done, Sidey. Like, stop. And then out of nowhere, they put him as a tagger and he killed it.
Yeah.
Just out of nowhere. Like, I've never seen it before in my life. He came in and did some really, really great roles. And now he's just earned as himself another season. Now, I don't know if it's going to be the same role again that we see this year. Obviously, traditionally, he plays as a wingman. He has played inside before, but matchup dependent. Do they play Sidey as a tagger? Maybe. Like, I don't know. It's interesting, but I can see him as the one that's probably first on the way out. Pendlebury, the LeBron James of AFL, like he just keeps kind of keeping on. Like I just don't understand. It's actually kind of superhuman at this point. Like
it is. But I think there's going to be games where it might not be, because Collingwood have so many close games. They don't normally blow teams out, but there will be the odd game in there that they will. And I think that'll be the 3rd situation where, you'll have a comfortable enough lead. It'll be, Pendles, you're 37, get to the bench, buddy.
Yeah,
and I don't think he'll. I don't think he'll complain about that at all. He'd be like, "Yeah, I'm good."
I mean, that's another reason why you probably have a Lipinski type, or maybe like even a Ed Allen or someone like that, or a Tom Mitchell. Like Tom Mitchell was sub a little bit, during the season. You can have a midfielder because you might want to bolster the midfield because the two guys playing midfield are going to be Sidebottom and Pendlebury, right? So I understand that from a theoretical point of view. In reality, you could do the same with Will Hoskin Elliott as a sub, and then when he comes on, you just rotate someone, right? So it just means you don't have fresh legs through that midfield. But look, ultimately, I will say that their best 23 stacks up pretty damn well against the rest of the competition. Injuries is going to be a key determining factor in whether or not Collingwood have success this year. A lot of people are tipping us to come straight back into the fold. Good recruiting, obviously. Dan Houston, which we'll touch on briefly, as well as Harry Perriman. I do think they come straight into the team. I don't think there's any questions about that. Have you had any reservations about them coming straight in?
Not at all, and especially because you've lost Noble for starters. So that was a guy that was playing most weeks.
Well,
There.
Markov could be that guy, but he's inconsistent. Sometimes he's just like the best thing you've ever seen, and then other times you go, maybe not today.
Yeah, not today, mate. But yeah, so Noble played 20 games last year. I think Perryman comes in, and depending on attitude and everything like that, I think Perryman is an upgrade there. Obviously, plays slightly different positions, but because Collingwood already have sort of that halfbacks, and the fact that they can move Pendles back down there if they want to, and the fact that you've also got Houston, who is the upgrade of Noble too. So you got two guys that have come into this side straight off. It's upgraded the whole situation around that. So
something that McRae really values is multi-positional players.
100%.
So the fact that you've got a Dan Houston and a Perriman that come in that can play in multiple positions in multiple roles, he would have loved that. He would have jumped at that, right? And he's also developed other guys into more non-traditional roles, right? So Josh Dacos spent a little bit of time at the half back line. He's been developing his craft a little bit there in the preseason. I still think he comes out and plays wing because he's probably our best winger at this point. Quaynor was a little bit higher up the ground. So what they did last year was they were playing, Josh Dacos deeper. They played Quaynor up in the wing, and he got forward for a couple of goals. And there were times where I went, where's his guy? Must be sitting on his own in the back pocket, and all of a sudden he's just popped up in the goal square for a goal. What happened there? And it actually was the fact that he's rotated to the wing, so he's playing a much higher role. Now he also just won the repeat sprints test at Collingwood. So that's obviously he's fit and everyone can see that Quaynor's fit. Do they persist with him higher up the ground and with the added flexibility of Houston and Perryman, they could potentially drop those guys into defense and have Quaynor playing higher? I don't know. I like him as a back pocket player, but maybe they want to get a little bit more out of him, a high draft pick, use his skills and tenacity on the ball. So there is definitely something there. And from a Supercoach perspective, if that happens, you may want to keep an eye on it. And he's a smoky draft option during the season.
Yeah. All right. Getting into those Supercoach targets. So I'll kick off with the first two are defenders in Supercoach. The ones that have been traded in, it is Houston and Perryman. Houston, frustrating because he isn't playing that round zero match. But in saying that, we do get, if you are looking at him as potentially maybe a side swap for somebody else over those first couple of games, you could potentially bring him in at round 4. We know he's averaged 106 the last 2 years at Port Adelaide, and he's going to take it. Well, not even just take Noble's role, but an upgrade in that half-back line offers them so much. What are your thoughts on, in particular, Houston, but then also Perryman, who's come in at a 417K, who's going to be playing the guts?
All right, well, I'll go through. There's a couple of things that I really love about Dan Houston and what he's added to Collingwood. I think he's quite massive, to be honest. The way that we play our football, you could tell that they needed 2 Dacoses, right? So they want Dacos behind the ball, but they also want Dacos on the ball, right? You can't do that. And we didn't really have the talent at half back to cover the loss of Dacos once he moved to the midfield. It's quite obvious to me, in all honesty. I think actually still to this day, some of Dacos's best games to date have been when he's split his time between back and forward and midfield. But now he's a dedicated midfielder, and that's what he's going to be moving forward, right? So to have Dan Houston come in and essentially play that role for us is going to be amazing because his foot skills are incredible. Now, what I want to see from him in terms of we probably won't get the information for, which is unfortunate, as you said, is does he become the main kick-out taker? Because even at Port Adelaide, he only really had 50% of them because Kane Farrell had quite a lot. They really split it around at Port, and that's what's happened at Collingwood the last few years. So even with when Nick Dacos was taking quite a lot of them, they also had Jeremy Howe, Darcy Moore, Noble would come in, Quaynor would come in, side bottom drops back and has a few kickouts every now and then. So they never really have a definitive like Shannon Hearn type role where it's like you're taking 7-8 kickouts a game, mate, and that's your role, right? They don't have that. Now, do they get that with him? Because that's the only reason why he becomes a really viable option. If they say, Dan Houston, your average is going to now increase by 5 to 10 points per game because you're averaging 6 kickouts a game or 7 kickouts a game, that makes him very, very Supercoach relevant. If they don't at his price with that buy, it's kind of like like I can probably wait. His price rise won't be before the buy, so you can literally wait until after the buy to pick him up. There's no real urgency to go get him. So I like him. I think he's going to be great. He could definitely be top 6, but there's not enough information and with the early buy to make me go, I must have him this season at this point. I think he's definitely an upgrade target.
Yeah, no, I don't think you start with him. The one thing I was thinking about Houston was he was such a dynamic player at the Adelaide Oval. We loved him with those home games and that home stretch, and we were choosing because of that. But you've got to actually go back to the 2021 season. Was the last time Houston didn't score over 98, and it was against Carlton for a 48 against any opponent which wasn't Collingwood. So did struggle against Collingwood. Wow. But every other time he's played at the G, and it's only like a handful, it's like 7-8 games in that time. But he's gone 98 or above. So I don't think the MCG is going to affect it because they are kind of similar ovals, the Adelaide Oval and the MCG. Yeah, anybody who's thinking, and that was my first thought, of like, oh, this guy just loves playing at home. I think he's going to settle in very well on the big open spaces.
Now he gets 17 home games a year. He's going to be
exactly.
Even better.
yeah. Just kind of scary in a way.
Look, I'll be honest. I don't think that he's a bad selection. I just think that because of the way that the fixture is, missing round 0 and all the unknowns, there's just better ways to spend your money, right? So that's just
he's in my team, Chris, by round 15.
Guaranteed.
Yeah,
guaranteed. And I think that you just don't need to take that sort of risk with the question marks, and also role wise, right? So does he spend time in the midfield? Is he pushing up to a wing? Do they want to see him using the ball higher up the ground? Like, they have the flexibility to be able to do that in game, right? They can do that. Mm-hmm. And what we know about Houston is he's much better scorer behind the ball. He can score all right on the ball, but it's going to be like a 9,500 average, not like a 105, 110. That's when he goes behind the ball. So there is a difference.
I don't think I've seen a player play that quarterback kind of 40 meters off the ball more than any other player than Dan Houston. Like, he just shifts with the pack.
Play it better.
And better.
Very
so
it'd
be interesting to see if Fly lets him continue to play that, where it's like, it does not matter about necessarily your opponent. We'll find ways to cover that. Maybe that's Sidey's role. Sidey, your defensive wing, you need to drop back. So Houston can just stay 40 meters from that pack because if the quick kick comes out, he just marks it. And most of the time, he switches it, finds the target, and off they go.
I mean, part of why I'm so excited about this year is that, like, the link-ups are insane, right? So Houston goes to Josh Dacos, who handballs off to Nick Dacos into the forward line, where you've got 4 guys, four smalls that are all dangerous and can kick goals, and now a functioning spine. Like, it's quite exciting as a guy sitting here. Obviously, we had some success recently, but I'm just angsting for the seasons to start.
I probably got that team lineup slightly wrong. I should have put Hill where Elliott is and moved Elliott over and put McCreary, and then you could have had IQ into Houston, Dacos, McCreary, Hill.
Yeah, and look, McRae has done this, and the club to a certain extent has done this too. But and I mentioned this on a previous pod sometime last year that Collingwood has turned into a team that not everybody just hates off the bat, right? People like watching Collingwood games now because it's exciting in nature, and not just because we hate Collingwood. Like, they're okay watching it because the game's probably going to be exciting and good. So credit to the coaching staff and to the team for turning around a perception that not 90% of the comp hate us, maybe only 70% do.
Do you actually want my view there from a Richmond supporter, and maybe Collingwood supporters will be kind of surprised, but. And a little soft spot because I had some family who kind of like Collingwood growing up and whatever. But I have a lot of respect for Collingwood. My hatred is actually for, in particular, Essendon. Like, I think most people know I actually hate Essendon's guts. I'm probably more
And your wife is an Essendon supporter.
Yeah, Carlton, unlike most Richmond supporters hate Carlton's guts. My old man's a Carlton supporter, so I've got a slight soft spot there. But Collingwood, it's never been the case, and even through like your good times, it's just respect for the other big club. Like, yeah, you are the number one club in the league. I'm pretty confident to still say we're form's not great, but the number two. Yeah, West Coast supporters might argue that maybe the Blues could, but I think it's Collingwood and Richmond. You know, we pack out the G during our exciting times, and even leading up to our exciting times, we play exciting football. It's usually different footy. Obviously McRae was a part of the Tigers set up there too, so love him. There's always going to be players, Maynard's a player that you're going to love to hate, but you'd love to have him on his team. I don't think any Collingwood supporters would be disappointed with opposition supporters not loving Maynard, but that's fine. Every team's got that player. But there's a lot of players there, as you said.
How much would you like to have Toby Green on your side?
Oh, 100%.
That's where I
Exactly.
see Braden Maynard as he's the heart and soul of our club.
100%.
And if he was traded at any point in time, which I don't think Collingwood would ever trade him, but if he was, that club, their supporter base would love him instantly. Yeah, he just bleeds the jumper. It doesn't matter. Yeah. He's there for the game. So
yeah. So it's a lot of respect on how they play and everything like that. So that's mine from a neutral and technically what should be a hatred point of view. But yeah, there's animosity.
No animosity or anything. Yeah,
yeah. So moving on to the guts. So they've got the premium, the frustrated kind of mid-pricer, and then obviously the cheap rookie. So Nick Dacos.
We've still got Perriman to cover a little bit.
Oh, sorry, Perriman. Yeah. So you can touch on Perriman.
Don't need to spend too long here. Look, I actually think that Perriman is a much better starting pick than Houston, and I've dabbled with him in my team a few times. There's just not enough information at the moment. What we do know is that he will split time between defense and midfield, which is what he did at GWS. The interesting thing is going to be what that split is like, because I've chatted to you, Swizz, off air before, and I think even maybe on a previous podcast where we had our initial thoughts, and basically we came to the same decision that he is exactly what they lack in midfield, right? Especially with Tom Mitchell not starting the season. He's a two-way defensive midfielder, right? They've got absolute rolled gold. They've got Nick Dacos, who's, as I said, one of the best mids in the comp. And you've got Jordan De Goey, who, if fit, is a line breaker, attacking midfielder, right? They need to be paired with a defensive mid, and Perriman fits that mold to a T, right? You can't really have Pendlebury playing that anymore. He's just too slow in transition, and he gets burnt a lot. Like, he was even getting absolutely ragdolled by Cripps last year. You could play Dan Houston in that role, but I think that they want to use his distribution more. So, Perriman kind of fit to me. He's that guy that can come in and he'll probably average, because he averages very well as a mid, somewhere between 95 to 105 if he gets, let's call it 60% mid-time CBAs, right? So I think that that's a real possibility. Others disagree. Others have said, I think it's flipped. I think he might play 40% mid-time, 60% off the half-back. I just think that we've got enough halfback flankers.
Yeah,
we've got guys that can roll through there.
Obviously, Crisp can still go in there. I've kind of tried to line it up with the interchange bands, the defender, mids, back, but Crisp and Pendles can swap. Like, we know Crisp has played that role. He can fit in anywhere. I feel like Pendles is more the one that comes on at halfback. We know he's going to run through the midfield at points too, but at some point, he can't just keep going Pendles. It's got to catch up on him. So I feel like, and it's a long season, so I'm sure they've got in the back of their mind, look, do they either go, do we tap this guy for as much juice as he's got in him, or do we've got to be kind to him and say, no, mate, you're spending a 30-70 split and you're going to be covering, and we'll find other options through that midfield, and we've brought one in Perriman, and then at some point Tom Mitchell will get fit and we can throw him back in there, or whoever. It doesn't need to be you now, Scott. So I agree 100% on Perriman. I don't know about exactly. I think the ceiling's probably 95. I think he's that 90 to 95 guy. However, we do get to at least see it in 0-1-2. There could be a slight price rise there if he was to come out and go bang, bang. But I don't mind the option of if Clary doesn't work out, that we've got the pivot
Flip.
for Will Ashcroft is the main one. Some people are talking Chera. I'm not as confident on that one, but at least it's another name in that group. Like there is a group of guys in that sort of 450 range. Even say Liam Baker, who's gone over the West Coast, is a forward mid. But there is options to go. Clary doesn't work out. If Perryman's the one that works out, awesome, great. You've got another option to potentially side swap to.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually looking at starting a defensive mid in midfield rookie, so that will give you the opportunity to swing that guy back and then swing Perryman into the mid. Swing someone out of there into the midfield and then swing Perryman into defense because obviously he's defender only at the moment. But by round 6, he'll obviously develop that DPP to enable that full-time swing. Hopefully, right? I think if he was to play less than 35% midfield, I would be shocked, right? So you plan on that happening. At his price, it's kind of a little bit. This is why he's currently not in my team, right? The price is the issue. It's a real awkward price. It's like you got to remember 417 again. You're looking at probably that's closer to 440 of old days, right? At 440 it's like a keeper range, right? So you're looking at a guy that has to be a keeper for it to work because if he's averaging 105, you're keeping him, right? And he's only really going to make that like good money if he's a keeper level. So. It's a really awkward catchment, and I just don't know. So I would rather have all of the information, bring him in up. Again, the buy is an issue, but he might go up, say, what, 20, 30K in that.
Yeah, it's not going to be a huge amount just because of that price point. So it's not like some of these other players who are in that 300 range who could go up 50K. Like you're thinking it's probably 20-ish, whatever. It's going to be a slow burn as he heads up, unless he goes nuts against one of those teams.
130 or something.
He's never been that guy. He's just never. He's a more a better range where it's what is it, a lower standard deviation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. His consistency is good because he's always. I mean, he relies on his points from his tackles, and his pressure on the ball as opposed to racking up and getting big accumulated numbers and things like that. So
20 touches, 4 tackles. A couple marks 100%. Might get on the scoreboard, and that's what. So there, and if he was obviously a midfielder listed playing defense, it's a different story because we don't want him as a Supercoach midfielder. But as a defender, how close can he get into that top range? We know he's probably not getting your Sheezels and your Clarks, Ryans, and that. But how close can he get from D6 to D10 in that range? Because that's where it kind of opens up. And if he's 100 to 105. You're like, okay, I can live with that because I've paid 417 for him. But if or around that mark, if he's a 95 to 100 guy, all of a sudden we're like, well, we're just missing points. And I think I'm trying to think of the player kind of last year that was a little bit like this, and it was just not close, kind of a slightly lesser version, nearly a Wanganeen Malira, where it's like it's there, but it's not there enough. And
exactly, he finished, I think, averaging a flat 100 or something like 100. That. Like, it's just like in defense, the defense is the new midfield. Like you need to be averaging like 110 to be a top 10 defender. Like it's crazy. So that's where I saw a drop off. And then if you look at what I would say, I do believe that he's possibly the best in that range. And I know you love him, but like Kane Farrell, for example, for 445, like would I pay 20K less to start Perryman? I think that they probably have a similar scope. I'd rather get on Perryman, right? Jaden Short, self-explanatory.
But then I could argue I'd nearly rather get maybe on the other guys because depending on the role. Like if Short's taking kick-ins or Farrell's like got a monopoly in that back line now that Houston's left, you could very much argue that they could all be similar average. They're all probably around Perryman slightly
similar,
starts
right?
cheaper,
Same
but
with Matt
probably
Roberts,
all similar
right?
guys. Matt Roberts is another one.
Same one, right? And then you go, so the other guys that could have uptick, but you're just like, is it enough? Someone like a Lawson Humphreys who proved that he can obviously score. Is he going to get that role again when it starts back up? Maybe, maybe not. Charlie Comben, what's his role this year? Is he still going to be playing behind the ball? Is he going to be playing in front of the ball? Like he scored really, really, really well as an intercepting defender. Does he continue that? I'm not really too sure. There's Mac Andrew, 396. He's an interesting one. That guy can play football, right? And he can score. He can score well in Supercoach too. does his role develop to the point where now he's averaging, Sicily type numbers? Because that's essentially the role that he's
Well,
playing.
and there's
But
tons of them. You got Max Holmes, you've got Daniel
yeah,
Rioli coming into that. McKercher. Like there's a whole lot of names in there who are around that 100 mark, and slightly worse price than what Perryman is. But I feel like, and it probably opens up the door now for draft where you kind of don't need to reach for a D2 because
there's a
I'd just
lot
be
of
waiting
good
for these
value.
guys to start going off and then pick up the last of them because they're all probably going to average the same and just go, okay, cool. Yeah, you guys all picked him up at your sixth pick or something. I'll just wait until my eighth round pick and pick up the same player. Yeah.
Yep.
All right, get to those guts, mate. So we've talked about the
Dacos, who probably don't need to go. Yeah, literally the Gadge clone. Like I've never seen someone as close to Gary Ablett Jr. And I'm not saying that he is as good because Gary, like for those watching at home, if you've never seen Gary Ablett play, he's quite easily the GOAT in my opinion. But the things that he could do when he had the ball, when he didn't have the ball, he'd get tagged every game. He got double teams. Like there wasn't a time when he never had someone on his hip, and yet he would shimmy one way and then be out the side of the stoppage the other way. So incredible guy.
First one, too personal. How old are you at the moment, mate?
39, mate.
Yeah, so I'm 40. So, and for those that don't know, I went to school with Chris's cousin. So Chris and his cousin are both 40. I'm 39. So we went through that era. We've been lucky to go through both. We grew up in the Gary Ablett Senior era and Gary Ablett Junior. I know like Kerry and Lee Matthews deserves to be in this conversation, but arguably the best player I grew up seeing as a young fella and down at the MCG when he played there was Gary Ablett Senior by far. And then the best player I saw, in my older years is Gary Ablett Jr. So just phenomenal how crazy good they are. And just the fact that, Dacos can be even talked about in the same conversation as Junior, who's talked in the same conversation as Senior. I think that's all we need to really say about him.
And you know what I would also say about Nick Dacos? Every single one of his peers says the same thing about how good he is. Like they are blown away when he's on the training park with them. Things he can do in the game, they just go like, "How did you even do that?" Like that's the sort of talk that Gary Ablett got. Like it was incredible to watch, but it was every single game. The consistency was incredible. The only thing that let him down in the end was his body. Like, he was just that good. Anyway, we're getting off topic.
He carried a team up in Queensland on his own shoulders. Like they're just ridiculous how stupid. Like that's gonna be the only knock on Nick Dacos when the comparisons are gone. As to the fact that he like one club player, we do respect one club players and stuff, and he'll never leave Collingwood. But the only thing that could compete with Junior is he'd have to probably leave and go to Tasmania and put them on his shoulders for a few years, like Junior did, because that was just stupid how good he was during those times.
It was crazy. It was the best for me because obviously living in Queensland, like I got to actually go and see him regularly, and that was a different experience because you can only watch so much of what a player does on TV. You know this as much as anyone.
Yeah.
When you go to a game and you watch them live, it's so different. The viewing experience on TV is just
limited.
It's so limited because from a game sense, from a coaching sense, from a structural sense, you don't see anything. You don't see anything at all on TV. All you see is the ball pinging around, right? When you're at the game, it completely opens up everything that they do and how much attention he would get. He'd be getting scragged 80 meters off the ball. Like it's just a different way of things. Anyway, we'll move on.
Yeah, Jordan De Goey, and like we've always got the tag, it's Kmart Dusty and everything like that. But it's
true.
It is true. He deserves that tag because, like, one year we always expected we're going to see the best of this guy. This guy has got so much talent, and if he put it all together, stayed on the park, he could be anything. But now he's turning, he'll be turning 29 throughout the season this year. It feels like it's now or never. It's now getting to the point where if it's not happening this year, it's never happening. And there's been glimpses and like the excitement machine, and he does it in patches. And that's why he's talked about in some sort of vein as Dusty, because he's got those similar skill sets. But until he puts it together for 23 games, we go, wow, how good was Jordan De Goey as a player? It's kind of one of those, Jordan De Goey had it, but we never saw it.
Yeah, and look, I will say this straight off the bat: saying that he's Kmart Dusty is not a dig at all. That's pretty damn good. You're close to one of the best players of all time, or like let's say he's 15-20% less than the best player of all time. The big thing is consistency, right? Like there are games that Jordan De Goey plays and you go, wow, that was a performance. But he might have 2 or 3 of those a year. Like Dusty was so good because you couldn't lose sight of him. He'd kick 3 goals in you in 5 minutes. Right. That was the difference between, say, a Dusty and everybody else in the competition at the time. So to say that he's, Kmart Dusty or light, Dusty light, that's a huge compliment. He should take that and run with it. I would be wearing that till the end of time.
Yeah, of course. But but at the same time, imagine if you actually put a whole season. And there's been times where he's played close to a whole season, but there's still like, and we've seen in sort of Supercoach where we sometimes have able to pick him up cheaper for a run. Like only in 2021, he had that sort of 48 and a 4. And if you like sort of got on in those 330s, yeah, he delivered great because he was turning up near like every second week. He went through a patch there of, I think, like 5 out of 6 weeks where he was scoring 100. And you go, wow, how good is Jordan De Goey again? But I nearly feel like it's like he's a guy that I potentially want to target at some point throughout the year because I know he's probably going to still even get cheaper from 441 because he's going to have that game where halfway through the first quarter, he's going off on the bench and he's injured himself again. He's scored 4, he's been subbed out. And cool, I'll pick De Goey up for 300 and something. And we know he's going to go on a run. The only problem is if he goes on that run before he cops the injury, or that 1 year where he finally strings it all together.
Well, I think that a large part of like Jordan De Goey's role right now, obviously he's played a lot of midfield recently, and you can see that based on his CBA stats, right? So 3 years he's basically been a CBA midfielder, so 77%, 79%, and then this year was only 63%, which is actually decreased, right? Now, part of that is obviously injuries. So in terms of games played, 19 in 2022, 21 in 2023, which is his highest averaging return. And then, of course, 13 this year, obviously, again, injury. He's never played a full season, which is like the Fife issue. And he's not listed as a forward, right? So if he was a forward, I would be hot on Jordan De Goey this year because I do think like he's actually had interrupted preseason. He's hit the ground running. He looks fit, fast, and powerful. And I do think that Collingwood are going to be great. So what does he average? 95, 100-ish. But that's not enough to warrant a starting selection with the bye or whatever it may be. If I don't think he's not an accumulator. He's a damaging per possession player, but he's not an accumulator, right? Like his highest averaging disposal, I think, was 23 or something like that. Like it's not huge high numbers. Like Christian Petrarca, when he was playing this role, right? They're very different. His disposal numbers went through the roof. That's how he ended up getting to 118, 120 average, right? That's not the same as what De Goey has been able to produce. You also got to remember he's playing in a midfield with Nick Dacos, who will touch the ball 35 times, right? So, and Scott Pendlebury and
his brother probably touches it just as much now because they wax and get it and you name it. And a couple of questions because some people be going, well, why is what De Goey even there? It's probably the guy I get the most questions about in regards to Collingwood.
Because people are looking for a guy around this price point, like a Clayton Oliver, like a Will Ashcroft. Like if they're not sold on those guys, Jordan De Goey is staring at them in the face when they're rolling through their Supercoach choices.
That's right. Always happens. So there's a lot of focus on him. The other part is just because I've got in a target, that doesn't necessarily mean for your round one sides. But this guy comes in the conversation, and he's always in the conversation throughout the year. Like it doesn't matter what part of the season, somebody will message me and go, "What are your thoughts on Jordan De Goey?" And it happens every year. It's probably of the players of that sort of mid-price range, outside of maybe Clary these days, who just because of issues last season, De Goey is probably the one I get the most questions about.
Yeah, well, there's a world where Perriman comes in, he's playing 65%, 70% midfield, right? They've realised they're stronger with him as a two-way midfielder than anybody else. Dacos is playing 80% CBAs. And then Pendles is still going really, really well. He's the only role he can play because he's too slow off halfback. but he does still provide, right? They then used Jordan to go forward for long enough over a 6-game period early in the season where he then gets DPP. And now all of a sudden, Jordan DeGoey is very, 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 very relevant, right? That's easy top 6 forward at 440K. That would be different. Now, what would have to happen, though, is that he still needs to be getting enough midfield time to be able to score points, because the consistency comes from the disposals, and if he's getting 12 disposals a game and kicking 2 or 3 goals, he's not going to average enough Supercoach to be able to be a viable forward either. So there's a balance there that needs to be hit. Can he play 35% forward? Yeah, he can. And he could be a DPP selection. But if it's, I'm playing 60% forward, you probably don't want him.
Yep, couldn't agree more. Ed Allen, mate, we don't obviously have him in the starting squad, but you did talk about him as a potential one to come in if you get a couple of injuries, even could be pushing, depending on if he has a really great preseason, to try to make that starting squad. 194, obviously don't see him as a starting point, but he is probably Collingwood's best rookie option. Especially if a couple of injuries were to happen around that sort of midfield area. So it's just, I think it's more one to keep an eye on, because potentially at some point throughout the year, he might able to bob up, and you at least get to have a look at him in that case for a couple of games, have a look at the role, see what the other, how long until other players come back around him. And if everything's looking right, he might become a selection for us.
Yeah, and look, I will go through some basics about the rookie situation, but essentially, there won't be, if everybody's fit, there's no chance that a rookie starts. We did that last year, right? We birthed a whole bunch of rookies, right? So in terms of rookie priced players, there might still be guys in front of him. So like there's guys like Will Parker, who's still technically rookie priced as well, 181K, right? He's not a starting selection. He won't get in the 22, especially with Perriman and Houston coming into the side, right? Giath, he looked like a deer lost in the headlights last year when he played his one game, but he's only 119K. If an injury happens, then they could look towards him as a guy that's an intercepting defender. And Jacob Ryan is another one that they've been trying to get games into him, but he just hasn't shown it at the level yet. But he's another running halfback flanker. Again, not really any room for him. Di Mattia, that was their first selection in the draft last year. I think that he was hampered by injury last year, didn't really get off the ground. When he did perform well, there was already guys in there doing a really good job, so they didn't feel like the need to blood him last year. But he could have an opportunity at some point. Ed Allen is the guy that is going to be in front of him, though. Like, let's be honest. He came in, he had one game to prove that he's at the level, and he absolutely killed it, right? He was very, very good. And he will be someone that they will try and get games into as much as possible this year. But again, it will be on the back of injuries or resting someone or whatever it may be. It may be as the sub. If one of these guys gets injured, he's probably first into that sub role in the initial games. So like he might even be sub round 1, but don't be tricked, right? Be careful, because obviously round 0. Houston is not going to be playing round 0. So Ed Allen could be the guy that comes in there. Will Hoskin-Elliott comes into the halfback flank role, which he did quite often last year, or plays wing and Dacos drops behind, whatever it may be.
It's actually the scenario we want, where you actually want Ed Allen sub a couple games early, stuff like that. So he actually drops back from that sort of premium price because of that. Was it 94? I think he scored in the last round against Melbourne, where he had like the 2021 possession game. So you want him to hopefully have a few sub games. And then if an injury happened at some point in the year, we could potentially bring him back in at 140, 150, whatever, a lot cheaper than at that price. And then that cash gen actually starts if we got a good period from him.
Yeah, exactly right. Now from there's other rookies that I said rookie price guys. Reef McInnes, if he gets that halfback role, that could be someone that comes on and explodes at 200K. So one to watch, but not one you would start with, obviously. And then in regards to Finlay McRae, like I think that this is his year or bust. I'm not sure how he gets into the team, right? Like he was the VFL Player of the Year 2 years in a row. Like, how does he get a go when he's already performed at that level? But every time he gets into the AFL team, he just cannot convert his ability, his playability. And I've seen his VFL highlights, man. He looks like a different player out there. And he goes to AFL and he's just not at the level. Like it's night and day. So have they just gone, look, you're not on our first team option, you're not on our second team option. Like, what's the plan here with Finlay McRae? Like, I just don't know.
I'm going to tell you his career projection right now. He gets delisted at the end of the year, goes back and plays VFL probably for a year or two, and he's in Tasmania's first starting side. Because by then he's a mature age guy who's just there to protect the young kids that they've got coming through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that
come back to me in 2028, guys, and say, "Wow, you were all over that one," or "I was completely wrong." But I tell you what, that's forward planning right there. Darcy Cameron, I've got listed there. He's in that mix. I've had a few people talk to me about him as a potential ruck starting option. The hard thing there is, again, that early buy. But we did see him obviously take over from Brodie Grundy in that role. He's been in it for a couple of seasons now. Doesn't have Mason Cox, unlikely to have Mason Cox taking that little bit more time off him, which has probably been a little bit more worry. We know that McStay's probably the one giving the chop out, but I feel more confident for the more ruck time in the midfield if it's McStay chopping him out than it was Cox, because I felt like Cox at least was probably a little bit better around the ball than up forward. So it's not a terrible option. Like, that's a solid pick, I think, but it's just, I don't think it's value. We always talk about value, and I'm like, okay, you're picking Darcy Cameron at a 105 guy. You're probably getting maybe somewhere between 105. It's probably somewhere between 102 and 108. So you're paying pretty well for what you're getting.
Exactly. Yeah, he's not going to be a bad pick. There just may be other options that have higher ceilings and higher growth potential at cheaper prices potentially. But
his run home was good. He averaged
120 guy.
He averaged 124 on the run home. So granted, I'll give him that, and that still included a couple of 90 scores, but it was boosted by that 165 against the Swans. So we did see a bit of a ceiling there. But most of the time for him, it's pretty consistent. Yeah, he drops the odd poor game, has the odd really good game, but he's the sort of guy that if I was like picking, say, a draft stars guy for that individual game, Darcy Cameron today's going somewhere between 90 and 110. Cool. Let's bank it in. It's probably more 95 to 110, but that's how I see him. Again, I think he's a good one for your drafts because people are going to target the big names. I think Darcy Cameron probably slides unless you've got a heavy Collingwood draft with Collingwood supporters who are probably going to reach for him. But there's a bunch of guys in that sort of mix. And I could probably see some of the other the rucks that we kind of have in that price range. People are going to probably reach close first for even Darcy and DeConning, who are sort of not just cheaper, but when you're looking through that draft list, further down on that points per year. So Darcy Cameron's probably still sitting there by the time you get to the 6th, 7th, 8th person on the list there, and you can spend. If we're talking about your value in picks, where people are taking a ruck maybe in round 3, you're picking Darcy Cameron up in round 10, round 12 for your team, for a guy that's probably only going to average 5 to 10 points less than them.
Yeah, I agree. Yep. Perfect, mate. Well, that kind of sums up Collingwood. I think we've done
well. It has been the longest one.
Under an hour.
We've kept it under an hour, which I was very mindful of because I didn't want any of these going over under an hour, but it was awesome. So the Collingwood supporters will obviously appreciate that. Tell us what you think. It's been a great chat having you on here, Chris, to talk the Mighty Pies.
Thank you, my friend, and we'll see you again in the next one.
We sure will. Thanks, guys. Tune in soon. Bye.